being repeated.
Cannot survive, they are being repeated. That was what I was actually talking at the opening statement of the first Nuremberg trial. As Professor Barrett said, after the first Nuremberg were 12 American trials. And I'd like to show one of them, the Eisenberg group case.
Prosecutor for the United States in what was certainly the biggest murder trial in human history.
We ask this court to affirm by international penal action man's right to live in peace and dignity, regardless of his race or creed. The case we present is a plea of humanity to law.
Where is Group D operating? Groep D opereert in de Zuid-Oostenrijk. Do you know how many persons were liquidated by Anschlag Group D aan het jaar van juli 1941 bis Juli 1942 sind von dem Einsatzkommando etwa 90.000 als liquidiert werden worden.
70,000 people in 1 year, killed in the trial. So one of the important points of my trial to be sure what happened. This man is confessing 90,000 killed. And it's interesting. That's why I talk about leadership. Benny Ferencz, the prosecutor you saw, he was 27 in those days. In fact, his role at Nuremberg was just conducting investigations. And then he went to see Taylor and said, look, I got this information, I have all these documents showing the Nazis killed 1 million people. Most of them Jewish, some anarchists, some gypsies. And then we cannot do it. We're closing. We have no more lawyers to do the case. And say, but I have 1 million victims documented. So Taylor told him, can you do it yourself? Can you be the lawyer? Ben saying, I never did a trial in my life. Okay, this will be your first trial. And it was his first trial. Okay? And he did very well. In fact, he read his case in 2 days because he has all the documents, evidence. So, as Professor Sittin said, was the Nuremberg trial and then some national cases. And I am proud because I was involved in one of them in Argentina in 1985. Can you show me the first time when I had to face people who was against me? The lead in the country was in favor of the military dictatorship. So I had to face my family. This is a general. The same person in trial now.
Son las dos notas
He was in trial.
del sistema de represión. Por eso hoy se hace necesario averiguar la verdad y juzgar a
This is
todos
me, just in case.
los que hayan violado la ley. En particular a los poderosos, a los máximos responsables.
And that, I spent all my life thinking that was my biggest achievement. I could do something bigger. But then, they offered me to be the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. And for me, as Robert said, the International Criminal Court is transforming Nuremberg into a permanent institution. And that's why, what I did, I invited Benny Ferencz to help me in my closing argument in my first trial.
Mr. Ferencz, your participation. We are honored, we are really honored to have you as well as the one.
So this is the same 27 at Nuremberg, now 93 at the ICC. This is the first trial of the ICC.
May it please your honors, this is a historic moment. I am now in my 92nd year, having spent a lifetime striving for a more humane world governed by the rule of law. I am honored to represent the prosecutor regarding the significance of this trial. In Rome, over 100 sovereign states decided that child recruitment were, and I'm quoting now from the statute, among the most serious crimes of concern for the international community as a whole. Vengeance begets vengeance. Seizing and training young people to hate and kill undermines the legal and moral firmament of human society. Let the voice and the verdict of this esteemed global court now speak for the awakened conscience of the world. Thank you.
Pleasure now to introduce our third panelist, the Israeli Minister of Justice, Ayelet Shaked, first elected to the Israeli Parliament in 2013, and if I can speak as a then fellow parliamentarian in Canada, I was able to witness her involvement in the Israeli Knesset, in the Israeli Parliament, in the struggle for equality, for women's rights, for rights of Israeli Arabs. Becoming Minister of Justice in 2015, she has earned the respect, as I know from my own conversations with them, the respect of bench and bar alike in Israel for her commitment to tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, to the pursuit of justice. Minister.
Thank you, Professor Cotler. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On April 11, 1961, a remarkable trial began in Jerusalem. Adolf Eichmann, a major organizer of the mass killing of Jews, was brought to justice in Jerusalem. Prosecutor Gideon Hauser said, "When I stand before you here, judges of Israel, to lead the prosecution of Adolf Eichmann, I am not standing alone. With me are 6 million accusers, but they cannot rise to their feet and point an accusing finger toward me, who sits in the dock and cry. I accuse, for their ashes are piled up on the hills of Auschwitz and the fields of Treblinka, and are strewn in the forests of Poland. Their graves are scattered through the length and breadth of Europe. Their blood cries out, but their voice is not heard. Therefore, I will be their spokesman, and in their name, I will unfold the awesome indictment." The Israeli prosecutor's opening statement instills in me a sense of duty and responsibility as I exercise the office of Justice Minister of the Jewish state. The Eichmann trial was an historic reminder of the tragedy that befell the Jewish people, but also a powerful statement of Jewish revival. Every day, Jews are reminded of Auschwitz. Every day, Jews say, "Never again." We are gathered here to mark 80 years to the enactment of the Nuremberg Law, Nazi Germany's legal framework of dehumanizing its Jewish citizens. And I can tell you that I'm here with my husband and his father, and my husband and I learned today that his grandfather learned here in this university law till 1936, and in 1936 he did a clever thing and went to Israel. His family thought he's lunatic, but he did it, and he was the only survivor of his family. And we also mark today 70 years of the Nuremberg trials, when the Allies, in the name of the international community, brought Nazi criminals to justice. The judges in the Nuremberg trial asked, how could such horror take place? The more they look into the question, the more they were puzzled. What answer would be truly plausible? Yet historians tell us that the German legal system was central to the Nazi extermination machine. Today we know more about the gradual process in which a nation, under the rule of law, turned its laws into a weapon against its own citizens. Let me quote the Justice Minister of the Reich, who wrote in 1942 in a letter to the President of the People's Court, "The decisive fact in criminal proceeding against Jews is their Jewishness, not their culpability. Or consider the Reichsman Secretary Office, which issued an order in 1943. The Jews who have been charged but had already served their time shall be sent to the concentration camps in Auschwitz and Lublin for a life sentence regardless of the original sentence. The 1961 American movie Judgment at Nuremberg tells the story of a Nazi judge that sentenced a Jewish citizen to death for playing with a German girl. The Nuremberg trials raised the question, was the capital punishment decided after the proceeding or before the trial had begun? The judge admitted that the judgment was already decided. And of course, you know, in Nuremberg trials, as we saw, there were hundreds of Nazis that got punishment there, but in reality, millions of Germans, women and men, should have been on that trial. You gave an example of the Eisensgruppen. You know, the Eisensgruppen, there are thousands of people who are part of it. They murdered and shooting 1.5 million Jews, but of course, not all of them were in the trials. Indeed, 16 Nazi judges were brought to justice in Nuremberg, and 10 were convicted. None was sentenced to death. Of those who served time in prison, several were released after a short period. But very many were not held accountable at all. Indeed, it's especially infuriating that many Nazi judges and other officials became the pillar to the post-war German legal establishment. In the beginning of the 60s, 80% of the federal judges in Germany were former judges under the Nazis. The German legal establishment deterred regarding the personal culpability of those who assisted the extermination operation. The German legal system failed in the denazification process that the Allies demanded after the war. I want to praise the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection for the Rosenberg Project, an important official initiative to investigate how the ministry itself dealt with the Nazi past. My German colleague, Justice Minister Heiko Maas, said that fact demonstrates the failure of the German justice system. And I'm glad that my colleague Heiko Maas wants to come to Israel in order to present the results of the Rosenberg Project. Minister Maas, referring to war criminals, also said their conviction would be important for Germany, for the survivors and for the victims. It's never too late to bring to justice. And he is right. Justice should not be only a German duty, but a duty for all of us. We all must learn from history. The history of the justice system provides lessons that can help us prevent future horrors. We learn that even a government of law can turn into a government of monsters. And we learn that the law can be transformed into instruments of injustice. For the Nuremberg laws, were drafted not by laymen, not by even politicians, but by jurists. Legal experts designed the mechanism that legitimized Jewish dehumanization. Yet, we must also remember that legal experts designed the mechanism of the Nuremberg trials. The line connecting the Nuremberg laws and the Nuremberg trials indicates that the law must be just and moral. It can lead to the abyss, but also make amendments. And history suggests a moral imperative. We must defend the integrity of democratic justice system. Cherished guests, this duty is the duty of all of us. The memory of the Holocaust obligates us to unite in condemning anti-Semitism and any kind of hatred. We must not tolerate the voice objecting Jewish people's faith and right of self-defense. The English poet John Donne wrote, "No man is an island entire of itself." He meant that every person is more than individual, but by virtue of one's humanity, he or she is a part of a community. In his words, "Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind." He ends his poem with a memorable line, "And therefore never stand to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee." Ladies and gentlemen, Donne wrote this poem more than 3 centuries before the war, but his words could express the idea that the Holocaust was not only Jewish tragedy, but a crime against humanity and the entire international community. And his poem could also express another idea, that the bell tolls for us today. We must not tolerate the voice calling to harm Jews and seeking to undermine the security of Israel. I regret that too many are yet to wake to those dangers. Indeed, it's an uncomfortable truth that anti-Semitism had not abated at the end of the war. We can witness anti-Semitism today. In fact, an anti-Semitic voice seems to get louder and stronger still. There are Holocaust deniers and others wishes to slander Israel and blame it for all the war's troubles. Organizations and movements such as the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, which target Israel, tap into anti-Semitic imagery and ideas. We witness anti-Semitic attacks in the heart of Europe. We hear anti-Semitic slanders in European media. We feel anti-Semitic hatred in the continent that should have learned the lesson. Has Europe really learned the lesson? Only recently have we heard Parliament members in European states blame Israel for forging disturbing incidents that were taking place in our street in which men, women, and children were murdered. And just a few days ago, we heard Ken Livingstone, the former mayor of London, suggesting that Hitler was a Zionist. And the member of the Commons said that Israel should relocate to the United States. She apologized, but Mr. Livingstone has not retracted his comments. I called the United Kingdom Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, to state clearly the Labour's commitment to fighting anti-Semitism. Mr. Corbyn must clarify that anti-Semitic comments are not within legitimized political debate, and that anti-Semitic views should end a politician's career and disqualified from any further public office. Make no mistake, the Israeli government cherishes our strong and warm relationship with friendly nations. Israel is proud to be part of the international community and is committed to the success of the international institutions. But we will not compromise our sovereignty. We will maintain our might, defend our borders, and secure our citizens, Jewish and non-Jewish. And we are also committed to the defense and security of the Jewish people. Israel was founded on the premise of offering a safe haven for Jews. We shall never depend on others for survival. We will determine our own destiny. We must defend ourselves because others fail to help us. I still cannot comprehend why the Allies didn't action to stop the massacre. How come the Allies didn't bomb Auschwitz? One B-17 flight could have saved so many, even hundreds of thousands of lives. I never got answer on that. I was in an era of Jewish power, but some of our detractors find that motion offensive. But like other nations, Jews now exercise power. Yes, we exercise power ethically, yet resolutely. On a Holocaust memorial here in Poland, it is written, "Our tragedy shall be a warning to you." The Holocaust harmless lesson but lessons not only for the Israelis, not only for the Jews, but for every nation and for the international community. We all must resist racism. Esteemed guests, more than 7 decades after the horror ended, what else should we learn? This is a time of transition, as number of Holocaust survivors decreases every day. But there are still many survivors with us, and we must spend resources on documenting their experience and publicizing their stories. And though many Nazis and their collaborators are dead by now, some are still alive and they should be brought to justice, even in an advanced age. That's our commitment to our 6 million brothers and sisters whose care for justice shapes our nation. The prophet Yeshayahu said, "Tzion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaveh b'tzedakah." The prophet promised that mourning will turn into joy. Indeed, our darkest hour turned into joy 3 years after the Shoah. We redeemed Israel and established an independent and thriving state under the rule of law. We are proud that our nation is governed by law and committed to justice. The Israeli commitment to justice is yet another expression of Jewish values. Our national life is a memorial to the 6 million who were murdered, and we are committed to their memory. I thank you all and remind you today that Am Israel Chai, the Jewish people, is alive and thriving, and thank you all for coming here. It's very important.
The evocative words during the Eichmann trial of then Attorney General Gideon Hausner, of reminding us that the words of law must be the words of justice. I particularly appreciated your reference to the German Justice Minister, Heiko Maas, because the German Justice Minister had wanted to be with us, is unable to be here. But he is not only playing a primary role, as Justice Minister Shaked said, in the implementation of the Nuremberg legacy, but as he wrote to me, expressing his regret that he could not be here, he echoed the words of Justice Minister Shaked by saying that the struggle against anti-Semitism must be at the forefront of the struggle for justice in our day. And therefore we must guard against dangerous words, guard against anti-Semitism in our pursuit of justice. And I just want to close by thanking each of the panelists, the Ministro Badinter, Special Prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo, Minister of Justice Ayelet Shaked, for your singular and collective contributions to the continuing pursuit of justice. Thank you. I want to call upon
privilege to have with us Edward Mosberg. He tells from his heart, from his eyes, from his innards. Please rise to welcome and honor survivor Edward Mosberg.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. First of all, I would like to thanks Dr. Rosman for inviting and Professor David Maklis for inviting me here that I could speak to you about the Holocaust. I wish that I would have to stay here and talk to you about the Holocaust and tell you that the Holocaust never happened. But it happened. And I have to tell you about the atrocity and murder that are committed on our family and the 6 million Jews. I have to tell you also about the collaborators that were working together with the Nazis. In 1941, in small town, the local people gathers several hundred Jews and they push them into the barn and they burn them alive. But also we have to talk about somebody else, a family of Joseph and Victoria Umov from Markova. In 1942, they took to their house 8 Jews and they tried to hide them. In 1944, somebody denounced them. And the German came in, they murdered the 8 Jews, and they took out Joseph and Victoria Umov outside in front of the people, and they shot him. They had 6 children, from 1 year and a half to 8 years old, and then when the children were crying, they shot them also. We should not to forget this type of people. We also have to remember Jan Karski, who was the one man who he said he wanted to stop the Holocaust. But he could not succeed. He talked to many politicians and didn't help them. There was one here family right here in Krakow by the name of Królikowski. In 1942, my wife and her younger brother, 7-year-old, they could not get into the ghetto. So they came down to their house and the Królikowski family, knowing that they endangering their life, they hid them for several weeks, knowing that in the same building the Gestapo was living. Ten years ago, my wife and I, one of our daughters, her husband, and 2 of our grandchildren participated in the March of Living. And Yom HaShoah, 7,000 children, those hundreds of adults marched from Auschwitz to Birkenau. My daughter and I had participated in the March of the Living before. For my wife, this was her first March of the Living. In 1944, my wife went on a march of death, but Dr. Mengele selected her to live. I strongly encourage everyone to make that March of the Living. I would like to read you an excerpt from the Holocaust Museum Bulletin. On January 1945, Soviet army units in southern Poland advanced on the little town of Oświęcim. What they have found shocked even the battle-hardened Russian troops. Outside the Polish hamlet was a waste complex of tents covering hundreds of acres, surrounded by fences. Pulling up to the open gates in tents, they found some 6,000 prisoners, many of whom were sick and dying. What is that place? They asked. Auschwitz, they were told. What they had stumbled across was the Nazi largest and most little death camp. Only a week before, ahead of the approaching Soviet troops, the Germans began hasty evacuation of Auschwitz, nearly 60,000 prisoners. All doing well enough to walk had been led on a death march through the snow west into Austria and Germany. Between 9,000 and 15,000 prisoners who were unable to continue were murdered en route, turning the evacuation into the true march of death. The snowy landscape soon turned red with the victims' blood. We ran in the snow like madmen without knowing where we were going. It was a truly death march, hell on earth. My wife went on her second death march at that time. While we were in Poland, we went to the concentration camp, Majdanek, Treblinka, Stuttgart, Auschwitz, Birkenau, Plaszow, and Belzec. I have to tell you about Belzec. From March 1942 till December 1942, the Nazis brought Jews from Poland and other countries into the camp at Belzec. Arriving prisoners were pushed into the gas chambers, where they were suffocated. from the engine motor film, the body was burned on the stock. The victim of genocide were adults, men, women, children, and infants. Can anyone imagine the horror that a mother experienced while the gas started pulsing her baby? While the terror of her choking baby is living, gasping his last breath. Can anyone imagine the painful cries and prayers as a survivor? I cannot understand this. No one can understand. Belzec had become one of the largest cemeteries of the 20th century in Europe. Belzec only had 15 acres of land, unlike of Auschwitz and Birkenau, which had hundreds of acres of land. Belzec was not a concentration camp. Belzec was an extermination camp. It is located in eastern part of Poland, close to the Russian border. Because of this location, it is not visited by any tourists or people from the Marshall area. In Belzec in 1942, Nazis murdered 600,000 Jews, 550,000 from Poland and the rest from Austria, Belgium, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Holland, Norway, Romania, Hungary, and Russia. My grandparents, aunt and cousin were killed. I lost 16 members of my family. When I walked through that now quiet lane, I could hear the cry of my family and the rest of the 600,000 Jews. Don't forget us. How can we forget and forgive the barbaric murder of our brothers and sisters in the Gestapo of Auschwitz, Birkenau, Majdanek, Treblinka, or Belzec? To forget or forgive means to kill the victims a second time. We could not prevent the first time. That we must not allow to be killed again. We have no right to forgive. Only the dead can forgive. How can we forget or forgive the burning of synagogue and the holy books and the Torah scrolls? And we should remember that the parchment of the Torah will burn, but the letters are indestructible. They exist forever and ever. I was born in Krakow, Poland. When the war started, I was 13 years old. My family and I were thrown out of our house and put in the Krakow ghetto. During the liquidation of the ghetto on March 13, 1943, I witnessed people being killed for absolutely no reason other than for being Jewish. I saw dead bodies all around when the German brought all the sick and infirm people to the gathering square. The crosses and cane and so forth were taken away. The Nazis told them to cross the square, and whoever would make it to the other side would be permitted to survive. And those poor people were crawling on their hands and knees. Nonetheless, they were all shocked doing that. People attempted to cross over. Also, when the mother was holding a small child in the arm, the Nazi would rip the child out of the mother's arm and smother so I head against the wall, killing them instantly. Or if a child was hitting in the Nazi shoot straight into the stomach, killing them. Following the Krakow ghetto, I went to Plaszow concentration camp, where I worked in the offices of Commander Amir. I saw with my own eyes how that brutal Stalin killed people for no reason other than pleasure. I saw when he ordered a hanging of a young girl whose name was White. The rope broke twice while they were trying to hang her. By the third time they succeeded. To my witness, I testified to it. I saw people being shot for no reason. The pile of burning bodies like those that we saw in the movie Schindler's List. Some have alive, never left my mind. The smell never left me. I always smelled. came from intact family, set of parents, 2 sisters, grandparents, and uncle and cousin. I am the only survivor. I'm okay. I lost my whole family. The German deprived me of my goods. My children do not know what is to have an aunt, uncle, cousin, grandma. For this I will not forgive. I will never forget. My father was killed by the Nazis in the beginning of the war. My mother was taken in transport from Plaszow in 1944. It is 72 years since the SS took her to her death. I can still see my mother waving her hands toward me. It seems like yesterday. If you saw Schindler's List, my mother was in the first selection. My wife and her 9-year-old brother was also taken. They were both taken to Auschwitz, but they were cast. They were burned into oil. And that one day before it, I found someplace a piece of the meat, and I gave it to my mother. She was so skinny. She was in her 40s, hungry. I put it in her mouth, and she spit it out, and she said, "This is crazy. I cannot swallow this in memory of her father." My wife's mother was killed with a benzene injection to her heart. And my wife saw when they were dragging her mother's body by the leg and throw into the fire and burn her. In 1944, my 2 sisters and 1 sister from my wife, along with thousands of others, were transported to Auschwitz. And in 1945, they were transported to Stuttgart concentration camp. They were led on a death march to the Baltic Sea. An estimated 7,000 prisoners were lined up along the beach and shot. The next morning was liberation. As a young child, my wife was also taken in 7 concentration camps. She was in Mielec, Wieliczka, Lublin, Dubienka, Kraków, Ghetto, then Plaszow, Auschwitz, Birkenau, Bergen-Belsen, plus other between. Her last transfer was to Mauthausen, from where she was liberated. In the movie Schindler's List, the people in the selection running naked and circling in front of SS were actors. When people do not eat for months, they look like skeletons, skin and bones. It is something one cannot imagine in this beyond belief. And I know this horror, and I testify to it. When I was transported from Plaszow to Mauthausen, where we were in an enclosed cattle house without window and facility for hygiene. It was hot. It was August 1944, and the people were dying from the heat. If you have seen Schindler's List movie, I was on that train and they were being hosed down with water. In Mauthausen, where I worked in the stone, I carried boulders up and down 186 steps. If you stop for a moment, the SS would beat you with their whips, shoot you, or push you right into the mountain to be dead. I was there, and I testified to those atrocities. From Mauthausen, I was transported to Linz concentration camp. On May 5th, 1945, the day of liberation, the SS told the remaining prisoners that the Americans were going to bomb this city. And that the SS want to save us. They marched us to the cage that had been set up with dynamite to blow us up. The dynamite did not go. They did not succeed. This is why I'm here today. I can attest to those atrocities. In another 10 to 15 years, there will be no more survivors. So you will be able to, your children, grandchildren, of the atrocity that I speak today. Mauthausen was the main concentration camp and had 47 soldiers. One of them was Abel's. In my opinion, Abel's is one of the worst kills because where they starving the people to death and cannibalism became there. You see this whip? I was beaten by 4 men with this kind of a whip. You don't understand what is beaten with this kind of a whip. It is 17 years, and I never forgot this. I wish at that time I would be dead. Because once you are killed, you don't feel this pain anymore. But I still today never forgotten the pain. I feel today what happened to me at that time. At the end of it, they had a bottle of water and they want to stick my head to drown me in it. But they did not succeed. This is why I'm here and I can tell you about of all atrocity. And you don't understand how many times I faced death, but I'm here to talk about it. I believe if State of Israel would exist 75 years ago, they will bomb the crematorium and the gas chambers, and the Holocaust would never happen. So long live the State of Israel! As long as I live, it is my obligation and duty to tell about the atrocities that were committed on my family and the 6 million Jews.
And I testify to it. We thank you for sharing with us your knowledge, your facts that you witnessed, your truth. We all pay honor to you, to your dear departed, and to your life. And we thank you.
Some concluding thoughts on a day when so many important thoughts have been expressed. Elie Wiesel said, Nuremberg is the story of those who did the killing. Nuremberg is also the story of those who did nothing. It's quite a story. A story about inhumanity, about immorality, about indifference, a story with many lessons to teach. But the past 7 decades have shown how few of them the world has wanted to learn. The lawyer in me, the judge in me, the child in me, the mother in me, the Jew in me. Each part of me reacted differently to different parts of the Nuremberg story. To me, the issue was about justice itself. And in the end, thinking about this talk, what troubled me most was how little justice there had been. The lawyer in me was offended, and so was the judge. But no part of me resonated more as I learned the Nuremberg story. No part despaired more than the Jew in me. My justice journey, in fact my life's journey, started with the injustices revealed at Nuremberg. Who I am, what I believe in, and what I hope for, all started with the Holocaust. 200,000 European Jews survived the Holocaust. 3 of them were my parents and grandmother. I'm proud of many things in my life, but nothing makes me prouder than to be the child of Holocaust survivors. And one of them was a graduate of this historic university. My father came to the Jagiellonian University in Krakow to study law in 1930. Because there was a numerus clausus, quota on the number of Jews admitted to the law school, he was one of very few Jews admitted in a class of over 100. Rather than sit in the seats reserved for Jewish students in the lectures, he told me he stood through most of his first year at the university. He graduated in 1934. After he finished his 8 years of legal training, he married my mother on September the 3rd, 1939. He never got to practice law in Poland. He and my mother spent 4 years in concentration camps. Their 2.5-year-old son, and my father's parents, and 3 younger brothers died at Treblinka. My father was the only person in his family to survive the war. He was 35 when the war ended. My mother was 28. As I reached each of those ages, I tried to imagine how they faced an unknown future as survivors of an unimaginable past. And as each of our 2 sons reached the age my brother had been when he was killed, I tried to imagine my parents' pain at losing a 2-year-old, and I couldn't. After the war, my parents went to Germany, where the Americans hired my father, who had taught himself English, as a defense counsel for displaced persons in the Allied zone in southwest Germany, and was made head of the Jewish community in Stuttgart. In an act that seems to me to be almost incomprehensible in its breathtaking optimism, my parents and thousands of other survivors transcended the inhumanity they had experienced and decided to have more children. I was born in 1946, and my sister in 1948. I think it was a way to fix their hearts